Hey everyone, it's Professor Floros, and I thought I would do a quick video to explain the CEQ assignment. I had hoped that the TAs could have recorded their discussion, but unfortunately we had technical errors. So I'm going to try and do as quick as possible, going through the entire assignment, and then hopefully break up the assignment into pieces in shorter videos. But for those of you who missed class, hopefully this will do the trick. Okay, so here on Blackboard, to get information about the questionnaires, you want to go to the questionnaires folder. And again, here is where I'm going to put videos, including this one, so I guess you found it. And here is where you're going to submit the CEQs. And I wanted you to know that we made a rubric for this. So if you click on that, you will look at all the different things you will be graded on. It says 0 possible points because the first one, the grade doesn't count. But if you want to end up in the excellent category for actors and interests, here's the description: good, developing, and beginner. So I encourage you to take a look at that. And if you want to look ahead at the rewrite, it also has a rubric with numbers. Okay, so you can see how much each section will eventually be worth. So to the assignment, so let's go to instruction and tools. And in this, there are multiple files. There is a blank questionnaire, which you can download, and there are two options for submitting this assignment. One is just to fill out this document, and the other is to do a narrated PowerPoint, which I'll talk about a little later. So you can download this document and then just type your answers straight into each of these questions. And please also note that if there is a bolded section, it means you have to talk about them. Okay, so not only do you have to answer the question, but you need to specifically answer about these. And just because there isn't a bolded thing in each of the questions doesn't mean that you don't have to answer the question. Okay, but I just wanted to highlight because these are things that students sometimes leave out. So make sure you talk about it if it's bolded. Okay, but what I'm going to focus on is the questionnaire with instructions. And again, you can download this if you want to have it on your computer or print it or however you want to do. But we'll just look at it here in Blackboard. So you notice it's the same thing, but it has some information about what to include. And again, there are two options for submission: a written version where you can just fill in the answers to the questions after each question, or you can create at least one slide for each question and then record yourself narrating the answers to the questions over the slides. I want you to look through these instructions on your own. I'm trying to do this as quickly as possible, but here we go. This is based on our framework, our 3 I's: interests, interactions, and institutions. And so you're taking an event that has happened within the time frame listed in the syllabus, and you are going to look at the actors, their interests, their interactions, and the institutions in which they're working. So each of these questions, 2, 3, and 4, correspond with each of those 3 I's. But before we can get there, you have to tell me what international event you're doing. So 1A is really simple. What's the event, including when it happened? So one of the things that trips students up on this is they will look at something like the war in Ukraine. The war in Ukraine is absolutely internationally relevant. However, we're looking for specific discrete events. So the Ukraine war has unfolded over a year and a half, but you need to pick something within the allotted time period and say Russian and Ukrainian forces fought in town X on X date. Okay, so you need to be very specific about the event that you pick. Your event has to have 2 or more international actors that are actually doing something. or one is doing something to another. So things like speeches do not count because nothing is actually happening. Okay, it could be we intend to do this or we are threatening to do this, but they aren't actually doing anything. So something actually has to have happened. Two leaders need to meet. A battle takes place. Something where there is action happening, right? Because remember, the second I is interaction. And if there's nothing actually happening, you don't have anything to talk about. Okay. So that's 1A. What is the event and when did it happen? And if you can't put a date on it, then it's not going to work for your paper. And again, remember, the date has to be within the 2 months that are asked for in the assignment. Okay, and then 1B is basically just give me a little context for what's happening. If you just say Russian and Ukrainian forces fought in the town of X, okay, that's fine, but it would be helpful to understand, why are Russia and Ukraine fighting? Where is the town of X? What does this mean for the bigger conflict between Russia and Ukraine? So how much is enough background? Again, imagine that the person you're talking to, the person you're writing for, doesn't know anything about what's going on in the world. So you have to give them enough so that going into detail about, in this case, this battle between Russian and Ukrainian forces, that they're going to understand what's going on. Okay, so this doesn't have to be long, but you need to help me understand. So if you're talking about joint exercises between the United States and South Koreans in the East China Sea, then you need to explain, why this is a thing, why anybody cares, etc. Okay, so that's 1A, what is the event, including the date. 1B, give me a little context, a little background, so that if I don't know anything about the situation, I have a little bit more understanding before we go into the details. Question 2, here we get into our first I. Who are the international actors and what did they want to achieve, i.e. what were their interests? Most of you are going to end up doing something involving two states or state leaders, but you can also do international organizations, multinational corporations, NGOs acting internationally, etc. So you have to tell me who are the actors. And then you need to talk about the interests of those actors as relates to the event that you have chosen. So if we're talking about the US and South Korea doing joint military exercises in the East China Sea, your two actors are the United States and South Korea. And the interests are about why they're doing this. They're doing it to make sure that they can work together in the case that they need to work together. Well, who might they need to work together against? North Korea and or China. And so what is South Korea's interest? Why is being militarily consistent with the United States important? What good does this do for the United States? You're talking about both this particular event of naval exercises, but you're also talking about the broader context, right? The U.S. is in a strategic rivalry with China. South Korea is facing potential nuclear attack from North Korea, right? So you need to talk specifically about the event, but also, again, the interests in the broader relationship. And so you need to talk about interests in two different ways. One is national interests. Again, if you go back to your notes from the very first part of our framework chapter, national interests are what are the interests of the country themselves. If an international organization is one of your actors, then what is the larger interest of the organization? And then particularistic interests are usually about the leaders. So if the United States and South Korea are doing this, there are national interests involved that involve security for the most part in that instance. But there are particularistic interests as well. What does this mean for President Biden to be engaging in this? What does this mean politically for the leader of South Korea? Are there reasons why it's especially in Biden's interest to do this, etc. Okay, so you're looking at both the broad interests of the countries or the actors and then particular interests of the leader or subgroups within the country, maybe a political party or the military or someone. Okay, so that's 2, interests. 3 is interaction. And remember, our options are cooperation or bargaining. And bargaining can either be coercive or non-coercive. And so if we're talking again about the United States and South Korea doing joint military exercises in the East China Sea, that is cooperative, right? They are working together to achieve a common goal so that one or both of them will be better off. And I should note, I'm sorry to do this to you, but just going back 1 second, you notice that the actors we were talking about were the U.S. and South Korea. Now, the bigger story includes a possible threat from North Korea, strategic rivalry with China. But China and North Korea are not actors in this interaction, right? They're there, they're looming over this interaction, but they are not actors themselves. So you don't need to talk about China's interests. You don't need to talk about North Korea's interests, just the 2, South Korea and the United States, that are engaged in this particular event. Okay, so this is why you have to be really specific about what your event is, because, depending on the event, will determine who the actors are and what specifically their interaction is. Okay, so again, remember, cooperation, at least one is better off, nobody's worse off. Bargaining, gains for one actor lead to losses for another. Coercion is using threats. And also remember that friends can also bargain. So not all bargaining is about use of force or potential war or anything like that. So many interactions include both cooperation and bargaining. We're negotiating over a trade deal, so that's cooperation. We want to be better off because of trade, but we're going to drive a hard bargain because we want the best deal for ourselves within this cooperative agreement. Okay, so if you have any questions about the nature of the interaction of your event, please reach out to me or the TAs and we'd be happy to walk you through that. Okay, so we've done interests, we've done interactions. Now we're at institutions. So these are the rules. 2 rules that you always have to talk about are anarchy and sovereignty. Okay, so what role does sovereignty play in this and what role does anarchy play? So in my example of the US and South Korea doing military exercises, sovereignty is there because it's always there. Both countries are sovereign, that if they're doing exercises in South Korean waters, then South Korea had to agree to let US military ships come into its waters, and neither side could make the other participate in this event, etc. You could also look at it in the broader sense of South Korea is very concerned with maintaining its sovereignty, and so it wants to be as militarily prepared as possible. In case it is threatened by its neighbors, it has the capacity to defend its sovereignty. Anarchy, well, this kind of leads to why they're doing this in the first place, right? If there were an overarching government with the ability to make and enforce rules, then it wouldn't matter how capable the US and South Korean navies would be at working together, because they would just be able to say, okay, we'll call the global police to sort this out if we're threatened. But they don't have that. And so the very fact that they're cooperating on military readiness speaks to the fact that it is a self-help environment. They have no one else to turn to but themselves and their friends. And so because of anarchy, they need to make sure that they could work together in the event that South Korea is threatened. Also, you want to look for things like, is there a mutual defense treaty between the 2 countries that lays this out and says we should be having joint exercises? If they're in international waters, there's the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea. What does that say about military exercises in international waters? Things like that. So you want to look at any treaty relationship between the countries, specifically regarding things that may touch on the event. But again, at minimum, you always have to talk about anarchy and sovereignty. So that's the 3 I's: interests, interactions, institutions. You've told us about the event, including the date, and enough context so we know what's going on. Now, sources. It is very important that you show where you got the information that you did. So you have 2 options for doing the paper. Again, filling in after each of these questions on the blank questionnaire, and a narrated PowerPoint. And depending on which option you pick will determine how you do the sources. If you choose the written option, as you see in all of the questions, if you choose the written option, after you've answered all the parts of 1A, what the event is on the date of which it occurred, then you're going to just list the source that you used, or multiple sources you used, to determine that event and the date. In the background section, you tell me the general context, and then you list the sources you used to answer the background, even if you already listed it in one. Okay, so for every question, you're going to list the sources you use to answer that question. All right, 2, talking about actors and interests. At the end of that section, you're going to list the sources you use to answer that particular question, and so on for 3 and 4. And then under 5, you're just going to list all the sources. I would like you to list them like you were listing in a bibliography or a reference section, which means name, author, website, or the name of the newspaper, or wherever you got the information. And if you used AI at all, you need to acknowledge that as well. Okay, so you're going to list the source used for each section, and then at the end here at 5, you're going to just list all of the ones you use throughout the paper. If you do the second option, the narrated slide, you're going to have a slide at the end that lists all of the sources by slide. So you'll have, slide 1 and then list the sources under that. Slide 2, list the sources under that. Okay. Before I take you to the PowerPoint, I just want to remind you of the bonus, which I will do a separate video on. The bonus is about planning out how you're going to accomplish this. So this is a sample. You can use these topics to help plan. If they're different, if you have a different way that you want to do it, that's fine. But before you start, I want you to plan out, when are you going to do this stuff? We have a due date for the assignment. When are you going to do the work so that you can turn the assignment in on time? And then as you actually do the assignment, I want you to be able to say when you did those things. And if you didn't do them, then say you didn't do them. And then after you do that, then I would like you to answer these questions. So if you do the written option, this will all be at the end after number 5. And if you do the narrated PowerPoint, this will be an additional slide or slides after the sources slide. So if you do this plan and then how you follow the plan and answer the questions, you can get up to 5 bonus points on the CEQ. Okay. All right. Now quickly, let me go to PowerPoint and show you what I want you to do. So this is, one of our PowerPoints from class. And if I were going to narrate these PowerPoints, then I would have bullet points. And, you've all been to class. You know that there are fewer words on the slide than words that come out of my mouth. And yes, I talk a lot, but I do not write down on the slide everything I'm going to say to you. So nor should you. You put down the main concepts, and then your narration is going to explain what you mean. So to do that, up here in the corner, you're going to hit record. Okay, and it shows you the slide you're on, and it shows you what's next. And if you want to make notes at the bottom of your slide, an outline here to help you remember what you're going to say, you can add those notes here at the bottom. So you're just going to hit the record button. You can, I'm going to hate this. You can turn your video on, hi everybody, so that you're in it or not. And then you're going to hit record. It's going to give you a countdown, and then you're going to record. When you're done, you're going to hit stop, and then you can export your video, and you're going to upload it. Now, I don't know what the size limit is for videos. And so, if you have a YouTube channel that you can share the video through the link, if not, you may have a hard time submitting this way. So I would definitely, if you're going to do this, I would start early enough and double check the size restrictions in Blackboard for how much you can upload. And I would definitely do like a one slide, record it, export it, think about it, listen to it, make sure that the microphone is working and all that stuff before you do your whole thing. Okay, so that is, to my knowledge, that is the assignment. Like I said, I'm going to make a short video for each of these. Sorry this was so long, but again, if you miss class, you're getting in 20 some minutes what took 45 minutes in discussion section. Please reach out to me or the TAs if you have any questions about this, and I wish you the best of luck. Thanks for your attention.